audio. So I'm just waiting a few minutes here and trying to make some adjustments to my desktop. I really don't like that VE logo so prominently over my face, so I'm going to adjust a few things around here. Um, yeah, just give me a few minutes. All right, let's look at moving this video up a little bit. Just resize it here. All right, so that looks like it's not over top of my face. So let's go with that. And minimize the streaming software again. If you're wondering, I'm using Streamlabs to stream this. So anyways, my wife had some time in the office this afternoon, and I wasn't necessarily doing much, so I thought I'd take advantage of doing another stream. The last stream I did was actually pretty popular. We didn't have a lot of views during the stream, but afterwards we did quite a few views. It was one of our better videos as far as view count, so I was pretty happy with that. Um, but today I've had some people talk to me about different Proxmox cluster stuff, which give me a minute. I actually noticed the title on this live stream is still set to Firewall. So I'm going to change that over to cluster. So if anybody's coming in, they have the correct name and know what we're actually talking about. So, yeah. Uh, with that, we should be able to get started. So the first thing I want to do is show you guys how I download Proxmox onto the Proxmox server using the direct download URL. This is not necessarily something that I haven't covered before. Actually, I think we have a few videos on it, but it's kind of great when you're starting to demo and learn with things. Like we have one server here in the office that we use for videos like this. And with those videos, it's kind of hard to do videos on clustering and stuff, of course. So we can do that. Now I have the Proxmox ISO here, but let's take a look at what I would do to set up a download just in case you guys don't know how to use that feature. So I'd head over. I'd usually start by Googling because, yeah, that's how I do it. And I'd just head over to the downloads page here and go to downloads. And Proxmox is really nice compared to some of the other places, right? Like they give us most of the information we need. So here's our hash and our download. And we can just copy the link here. So when we come back to our server, we can select our local drive and ISO images, and then we can click download from URL, and it'll paste in a link. Then we can give it a name here. We're going to make sure we put .iso at the end of it. If we don't, it'll just not work. Things will fail. And then we can go ahead, take note that this is 256, and we can copy this right here. They've made it really easy. I wish they hadn't have hidden it in the Advanced tab, but if we check Advanced and then we just uh, click on 256, we can just paste that in. And it'll automatically hash this and check everything for you. Thank you guys for your comments and your support. It means a lot. We started this out back in 2020 to try to teach people, and it means a lot to me that you guys are liking our videos. That's the goal of what we're doing here, right? I want to teach and learn at the same time. When I set out to learn about Proxmox, I necessarily struggled finding content, so I started creating content so that I could help others. And you can see the download happening here. You can close this screen before it finishes, and when it'll be done. We can move on, of course, because I have an ISO here. And I'm just going to go ahead and create the first VM. And you wouldn't necessarily want to do this for production, but for demoing in a cluster today, it's pretty good. Like, it'll be a nice way that we can just learn and move on with things. And I'm going to put this over on my LVM drive. It's a SSD, so it's a little bit faster than the storage drive, which is platter. And I'm not really worrying about much. I'll give it a few cores here just to make sure things go. 2 gigs will work. We're going to use most of that, though, as we move through everything. So as far as hardware today, I'm actually on a pretty low-powered system. This system is a first generation, I believe it's a Bulldozer APU A6 class. It's one of the better A6s with the better graphics, but it isn't anything special. And I think there's 16 gigs of RAM. It's a pretty low-end system that I think I built back in like 2010, 2012-ish as a home computer, and it's just hung around because it's a workhorse, right? So we're going to make one here. I'm going to go ahead and actually start a second one because as we're learning about clustering, we're going to need 2 computers. It's actually better to have 3 nodes when you're doing clustering, but for today's demo, 2 will kind of work through things, right? And again, I need to go back and we're going to just push this onto this, give it 2 gigs network. And we can then go ahead and start this system and open the console. I probably should have done this before the live stream, right? It's going to take us a little bit longer of the live stream before we get into things to do that. It's actually funny. So we're going to get this message here that's check BIOS. We can really ignore this right now. It's basically however it passes things through, it doesn't get the full virtualization. But I've run containers this way and it really doesn't matter. So we're just going to click OK and tell it I agree and move through this pretty fast. Like I'm just kind of roughly want some machines here. And I'm going to enter a simple password just because we're not looking for much. This email, if you leave it to default, it will error on you. So I'm just going to put test at the end of it so I can move through. And we can, I'll give it 101. It's pretty simple. We'll have to remember it later. And I can go ahead and do the same now and get the other install going. kind of look back at loads, like I mentioned about the RAM and stuff, you can see how much RAM we're using during this install. It's fairly intensive. Like 2 gigs is enough to run this, but I wouldn't want to try virtualizing anything really inside of it more than maybe one container or something for tests. But as we're going through and learning about Proxmox configurations and stuff, virtualizing Proxmox as a test environment for that is really kind of nice. Like we can play around with things, break things, and throw it out and start fresh again without worrying about having problems or messing up our system or really taking any of that time. I, it's part of why I love virtualization, right? Like it's such a time saver from setting up bare bones systems and moving through. Uh, I don't really have much experience with VPS, so I really wouldn't feel comfortable giving a real suggestion, right? Like, so I don't know if you caught this in the beginning, but really virtualization and everything for me comes as a hobby. I actually work as a machinist professionally right now. I don't even work in the IT world. I started on a path of studying cybersecurity and started really digging into this stuff that I played with as a teenager and in high school and getting more into it. And that's when I started getting into virtualization and things like that somewhere around 2019. And Proxmox is what I discovered and used. I did a little bit with VirtualBox for a while on my home system and stuff. I didn't like it tying up my windows and just being there. So I liked the idea of a separate computer, and that's where I went. So I'm sorry, I really don't have a good suggestion. I really like using an external USB drive for Proxmox to Proxmox migrations, but I don't know how that really applies to VPS, right? So sorry, I don't really have a lot of feedback there for you. Hopefully, our downloads are done here in a minute, and we can start playing with some clustering once these installs are finished. I really should have set these systems up beforehand. Um, I kind of wanted to show you guys how I did it for learning. I think it's great for you guys to know. But yeah, sorry about the added time onto the video. All right, so we want to make sure we take note of this IP address if we haven't already. I'm assuming if you guys are here that you probably have played with Proxmox a few times, so I'm not going to go much into detail of that. But here's our first server coming back onto line. And just to take a look, like here's some old Proxmox documentation on clustering. I'm going to refer to it more for the part where I want to cover deleting a node out. But as far as creating the node, we're going to kind of just go through the wizard. It's actually pretty straightforward for creating multiple nodes. I haven't had a lot of experience playing with it. Like my home server's on Proxmox, and I kind of keep this server a little bit separate, just because I want to keep it that way. And I run a few utilities here that allow us to interact with it as I'm on the road, and some video utilities and stuff for work with my editor. But so it looks like we're up online with the first one, and the second one's starting its reboot now. So we can go ahead and start. And I think it was 101. There's our first one coming up, and it looks like our second one's up, so we can go ahead and log into that one. All right, so we have both servers here up and going, and we can close this out so it doesn't get in our way at this point. So setting up a cluster, as far as Seth, I haven't really gotten into a lot, and maybe we'll make another video playing around and learning about that. But to get a cluster going and then to break down a cluster is what I kind of intended on covering today. And it's pretty straightforward, right? Like, so we probably want to first start by getting things up to date on these computers. It's not really super going to matter. So let's try not to do it, but we'll probably want to go to that. And then if I can, all right, cluster, there we go. So under data center, we can start here with the first system, and we can click create cluster, and we'll give it a cluster name. I'm just going to call it video today, and then we can create that. Now with that created, we can close that out, and we can actually get our join information here by clicking join information. And then we're going to head over to our second server here and go to cluster. And we're going to click, instead of create cluster this time, we're just going to click join cluster. And this information right here, all we do is we copy it, we move it in here, and we hit paste. We're going to have to enter our password, and then hit join. And it looks like we may have had an error, so let's try again. Information. Here's address, is all right. Of course, on a live stream, it's making a fool out of me, right? I actually might know what's going on here. Hold on for a second. I have some firewall rules in here, and I think they may be banning some communication that's working later on. So let's turn that off for now, just for the video, and see if we can get it to work. Sorry about this, guys. I'm not exactly sure what's going on. that's the beauty of being able to play here in a virtual environment, right? Um, Yeah, that's true. It's why I like virtualization, right? Like we're learning about stuff and learning about it together, and we're able to do that. So, I it's that's what brought me here, right? Like just being able to play and learn in an environment where if we have problems, we can delete it all and start over and not worry about it. It may be that our systems aren't up to date, and I'm going to go off and try that and see. So if we go over here to repositories, if we want to use a no subscription setup, we can actually disable the subscription service by clicking on it and hitting disable. And then we can click add and click OK on this message and actually select the no subscription repositories. We don't have to go in and edit files anymore like we used to. And now I can go ahead and go back to updates and I can refresh. Now I can close this out, and as you can see, it's a new install, so it's got quite a few updates. Let's let that run on this system here, and let's do the same on the other system. Hello. So while we're waiting for these updates, I'll actually come over here and I'll show you guys something. Um, Earlier this week, we did a video on firewalls, and I talked about enabling and disabling firewalls and how firewalls had to be enabled in 3 places to work. And if you missed that video, definitely go out and check it out. But I'll show you the firewall rules here. Here's a Pi-hole container that I have running. We have some videos on setting that up if you'd like to check them out. But here's all the rules. So we actually have quite a few set up in here for rules in order to get this work. And you notice I'm dropping, at the end of all of this, dropping all in and out information. But in order to get updates, we have to allow outward information on port 80, 443, and 21. That allows our container, our Ubuntu container in this case, to update. Then, of course, I need to allow information going out on both TCP and UDP for uh, DNS to work, and that happens on 53. And I also have to allow it to come in on port 53. Then, in order for my web interface to work, I need to allow incoming traffic on port 80. And then to get DHCP to work in the house, which my Pi-hole container is also taking care of, I need to allow traffic out on port 68 and allow traffic coming in on port 67, and that's both UDP. Looks like we're finished updates here, so let's go close this stuff out and go back and see if we can get this cluster to run now. So here's our first cluster here, and we're going to copy the information, and then we're going to go over to cluster, and we're going to click join cluster, and then enter my peer's password, which we configured a minute ago and definitely logged in with. And we're still getting an error, of course. So you notice the fingerprint and everything moves over. Doing the same thing over and over is the definition of insanity, right? Like, but I'm trying to check different things. I don't really want to waste a lot of time doing another install and trying that. And sometimes that's what it takes, right? Like, that's why I like to test things and figure out work paths and stuff in a virtual environment. I know I've said that a few times, but it's actually a good idea. Let's try that. Let's try restarting both systems. Right, so both of them should be up and running. Let's refresh here. Go ahead and refresh here. The other problem that I'm thinking we could be having is they both have the same name. Yeah, and I think that is exactly what's happening. Can't add existing node PVE. I wonder if there's a way, I've never done it, but I wonder if there is a way to change the name of a node. And if you watch any of my videos, you can see I'm famous for making a typo where I reverse the T and C in ETC. It's the system rebooting here. Oh, thank you for that. I just noticed it come on the comments. So I actually have your messages. Instead of last time trying to all do it on one screen, I actually started up a second screen here in my office on a different computer, and your messages come up there. So let's take a look now. Refresh. It's to be expected. Alright, so we have a different name now. Let's copy that join information. And this traditionally, when I've done it, it's taken a few minutes. It looks like the request finished up. It's like we're stopping cluster service. I haven't gotten the task okay yet. But we did learn something during this video that when we set up our servers, we need to make sure that they do have unique names because if we don't, they're not going to join, they're not going to work together, and it's going to give us an error message. Here we go. We can see now that we have PVE and PVE1 added here on the same user interface. Now the really cool thing is no matter which user interface, once they get locked together as a cluster, everything shows up from either server. So we're able to manage either server in here, both together, and look at everything running. Of course, there's not much going on here because they're demo installs that we've done here. So here kind of gets to the fun part, right? Like trying to break these two apart. Now, Proxmox, as I read through some of this documentation on their wiki about, well, not that one, about clustering here, they actually talk in here at some point about it's not suggested to break these apart manually. I know a lot of you have asked me about it. I've had 5 or 6 different comments about that. And their reasoning is you have to go in and mess with files, and there's quite often some errors that occur. So we're going to explore it and play around and see about how that all works and try it out. But know that we could end up having some problems here. So yeah, let's try this out. I'm pretty sure, yeah, we want to shut one of these systems down after we list out the nodes. Of course, we know the name of it, but, and I don't think we're going to need any other information, but let's start a console view here. I got a lot going on my screen. Let's close some stuff out. I'm just taking a screenshot of this information in case I need it later. And then let's head over to PVE1 and shut it down. So after PVE1 shuts down, all right, interesting. We can see that PVE1's up and PVE's actually what shut down here. Okay. Let's try it anyways. Let's see what happens. So we're able to run a PVE CM delete command here. And then we're going to want to put the name after it. So knowing that PVE is what shut down, we're going to enter PVE. And yeah, so we're getting a no quorum message. And I believe from reading further down through here, we can actually change the number of votes expected by using this command PVE CM expected 1. So right now it's looking for votes for 2 different systems. Now, ideally it has 3 or more, and it wants to maintain 3 or more. So when we break it, it doesn't have as many as it wants. So we're going to have to tell it that it has a different number. And now we should be able to go up and delete the node. And I'm getting another error message. Try stopping it. I don't think this is going to make a difference, right? Like, so that killed us altogether. Nice. Interesting. So even though we got the error message here when we broke them apart, it appears that everything is actually deleted. shell's not working. Let's try a reboot. Let's see what happens. Ow. Alrighty. Let's try rebooting this way. Alright, so we got an error message, which I'm still a little bit nervous about. But if we look in here, and shell's back working now that we rebooted. If we look in here, it looks like everything broke apart. And if we come into clusters, though, you can notice that the node is actually still there. So I don't know if we actually did fully break it. I don't think we did. So let's start the other part of the cluster up, shut this one down, and see what happened there. Not entirely sure. I'd say we were unsuccessful here actually trying to break this cluster apart, because if you notice here, we still show that we have ID of 2. We do have join information here. So might be that we have a cluster itself created, because remember when we made the first cluster we have join information. We didn't make it here on PVE1, right? We made it here. We made it on PVE. So it's a little bit weird, but it could be that we removed the node and we're all right, and we could join the two back together or join another one if we created it afterwards. So I'm going to shut this down. I'm going to start to roll the system up. Hello, and thank you for joining us. If you're new here, I'm kind of playing around with clustering today. It's not something that we've done a lot of, and I'm demoing it here on a single system with 2 separate Proxmox installs that have been virtualized. The other one's up and running. Refresh. So we definitely see PVE1 still here. And under both nodes, they still show up. So it's definitely something I'm willing to do in a future video. Right now, I had intended on covering deleting them apart, and I was hoping to maybe possibly add them together today. Again, we're starting to get towards the end of time that I probably have available for today, but it's definitely something that I'll be willing to do in a live stream here in a little bit. Stay tuned, and I'll probably do that. So we can try the delete command again. Let's see what happens now. And get the same no quorum. Change the quorum that's expected. And then let's try deleting. All right, but it's killing node 2. All right. But it's okay, so it left the cluster created. So trying to rejoin these systems might be complicated. That's why I went back early on when we were having problems and had disabled that rule that I had created in the firewall for the server, is because I was worried that SSH might be getting in the way. This should just give us a status. Just the one system on there that we expect. Alrighty here. Separating node without reinstalling. So we want to stop some services per documentation. Start the cluster file system again in the local node. All right. And then we're looking to delete some configuration files. Now, this is absolutely why I love doing this in a demo system and virtualized for the first time, right? Like, always panic about deleting files on a system that has things on it that I want to save. Okay. And now we're going to start back up the PVE cluster. All right, so looks like now we can use the command, the delete command that we had already did to delete it out of the other nodes. So, and that gets rid of the quorum vote. And we did that. So we head back over here, and the node has been removed. Okay, so the whole cluster's been deleted out. If you didn't follow along and catch that, we're actually looking at the documentation here from Proxmox under cluster management. I think what I'm going to do now is go ahead and start up that second server here that we made, follow the same process, and then try to actually add them back together and see if they come back together without any error messages, so that we know that the server's pretty much been restored back to its hypothetical, quote unquote, however you want to word it, default state, and could be used to join another cluster or whatever if that was your intent. And then as long as that goes well, we're going to end the video today off there. And then I'm going to move on. I definitely like the idea of doing a live migration, but I want some more time to read on some documentation on that before I try to go ahead and do anything here live. I feel it might get boring as I spend a couple hours looking at documentation and getting ready for that. I've never tried it, so system should be up and running. Let's do a quick refresh, and it is. And we can see that we are still here, part of the original cluster. So let's go ahead and open our shell and try out the process again. We're going to stop these two services. I'm going to start the cluster filing system again. Then we're going to delete this config file, and it looks like we're going to delete the directory that it used to sit in. Then we're going to start the filing system according to the directions again. And we're going to start the service from the cluster, the PVE cluster service. So right here, when I copied and pasted last time, you noticed it paused there for a few minutes, and it's doing that again to me. It's kind of interesting. I don't quite know what's going on, but something to note, like as we were moving through starting all or the kill all command and stuff, it took longer even though our command prompt came up. Something odd I noticed, right? All right, so that should have gotten rid of everything here, and it did. So now if I was to create a cluster here and give it a name and create it. Okay, so we were able to recreate the cluster. Now I can get the join information and I can copy it again. And we can go over to our PVE server or our first server and paste this in, giving our password and hitting join. And hopefully we see them both come online. So we were able to create this cluster and then delete it without reinstalling it and re-add it. Now the warning I'm going to give you is some of this Proxmox documentation as we look through it warns against doing this without a reinstall because it can cause problems sometimes with actually deleting it and re-adding it. Now of course we're not trying things like live migrations or even starting and stopping containers or VMs on this today. So it appears that we were fairly successful in doing this, but it's really hard to tell. Like, I would definitely consider this a case-by-case basis and make sure your containers and your VMs are at least backed up before you do this in case you have to do an install. And if you were trying to do this on a quote-unquote production system or something that you had a little bit more live than a couple of virtualized Proxmox installs like I was today, I'd definitely make sure you were off hours in case you had any problems. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'm definitely like that idea of the live migration. I'm going to read some more documentation and try to do that. And here in the coming weeks, I'm going to try to put some of this information that we learned today about breaking these nodes apart and gathering them together into a little bit more of an edited video that has a little less of me fumbling through the process for you guys all to touch back on if you try to do this project for yourself. I hope you enjoyed tonight's video and learned something along with me. And thank you for all of you guys that helped me with some of my problems or some ideas. We're at the hour mark, so I'm going to end this video off, this live stream. So have a good night.